AutoLine After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, solutions for your journey, and by Intrepid Control Systems, over-the-air engineering. Boost your game.
Gary.
How are you, John?
I'm very good. And, usually you have trivia and, dates and history.
Mm-hmm.
So I got a question for you. It's just a question. You don't have to guess on this at all. Did you know?
Sounds dubious.
Did you know that the Toyota Tacoma last year outsold the Ford Ranger, the Chevrolet Colorado, the GMC Canyon, the Honda Ridgeline, and the Nissan Frontier put together?
And I'll bet you that if we went back the year before that, and the year before that, and the year before that, the answer would be the same.
Well, not quite the same, because some of them didn't exist a few years before that.
True.
They came after the segment, and I am so knocked out at how strong the Tacoma is that we had to have a special guest today, Sheldon Brown from Toyota, chief engineer on the Taco, as they call it, for Tacoma.
Tacoma, yeah, it always they're interchangeable as well. So great to be here, guys.
And we've got Richard Truett from Automotive News.
Yeah, yeah, to lend some engineering expertise,
some credibility to the program.
That's exactly right. So, Sheldon, you got a brand new, all new, from the ground up Tacoma here. What'd you set out to change? I mean, what have your customers been telling you about the old truck? Like I said, the old truck, brilliant, dominates the segment. Everyone's been attacking it. They haven't made a dent in you guys whatsoever, but clearly you changed a lot on the new truck. Why? What did your customers say they needed or wanted?
Well, it was a long time coming, right? And we've been working with this truck now, for the better part of this platform, I'll say, for the better part of a decade, and almost getting closer to 2. So we've enjoyed a lot of success, as you mentioned, in the market, and I think that was really foundational, to a couple of our core identity, right? We call it quality, dependability, reliability, QDR. We say it all the time. But when we looked at this truck, we said, okay, we want to think about, okay, what are our strengths? We're going to go and take a look at those. Then we're going to look at, what are the areas where we think we have opportunity? And so, yeah, we knew that the QDR is going to be foundational to anything that we did. We were going to maintain that. The other really important piece when we thought about this was what people came to understand. We called it Tacomaness. It's really that iconic silhouette that people, when they look at it, it's recognizable. For us, it's that high lift, that like tucked rocker. We see the compressed kind of cabin, and we have that really, I'll say, continuous silhouette. So when we did the refresh and the styling, when we went with the studio, we said, we wanted to be evolutionary, not revolutionary, because we wanted people to recognize exactly what the truck was, but also see it in a way that was new and redefined and was, very clearly that it was developed all new. But then there were other things, that we looked at. We looked at the package, garageability. That was one thing that we heard in the compact segment or the midsize segment that our customers demanded. We didn't want it to get any longer bumper to bumper, and we wanted to be really careful about door to door so you can get in and out of the truck real easily. But then, we had heard areas of we wanted to see improved fuel efficiency, wanted to see increased technology coming to the vehicle, and then I think the other one was really drivability. That was another really important thing. So when we took a look at this new platform, and we, like you said, it's really truly a ground up. It's all new chassis, all new frame, all new upper body, all new powertrain. So it's a white sheet of paper, so to speak. So we really looked at those areas and we said, okay, let's make sure that we address all of those, and then we progress the truck in terms of capability and functionality. Not just today, but what is it going to look like in 10 years to make sure that we're being competitive. So pretty comprehensive approach.
So if you guys did a spider diagram looking at all these elements that you needed to work on, what points did you really need?
Well, like I said, efficiency, really important. So, you'll notice in most of our fuel economy numbers, while delivering increased power, torque, and improved emissions performance, we're also about 10 to 15% more efficient in terms of fuel economy. Drivability is, I think, if you have a chance to drive the truck, I don't need to say anything, you can just drive it. It's much better. We really focused on something called gradability, and that's the ability for the right amount of drive force in the right gear, so that as you're moving through, for example, up a particular grade, you're not, constantly shifting and seeing the vehicle kick down or the RPMs jump up. This is really important that we did that, and we were able to do that with the twin turbo, the L4 turbo, making sure that we had a lot more torque, so we had better drive force, and then of course the 8-speed transmission. Being able to segment the gears so that we have really small pitches and we can move through those very efficiently. So those were really the two big things that helped us achieve that. But really, if you look at that spider chart, and I don't want to sound overly braggadocious, but everything around that spider chart, when you compare it to the old vehicle, we really tried to push it out and to make it a lot better, with the exception of maybe like, length and width and things like that I talked about.
Richard.
Why did the old truck live so long? If you look at how
Mm-hmm.
Toyota cadence of refreshing products, it's very unusual for a Toyota product to be old enough to vote. If you look at some of the
Yeah.
parts that are in the old one.
Well, and I think there's a little bit of planning on that. There's a little bit of cadence as well. So if you think about the TNGA, that was the new global architecture, and we really started, as we rolled through from our C platform to our K platform. And unfortunately, F was, someone has to be last. F was the last one. And then as we started to, redo the F platform, we began with Tundra, or actually really Land Cruiser globally, and then Tundra, Sequoia, then the cadence was Tacoma. Yeah.
So one unusual feature is you have 2 rear suspension systems on there.
We do.
Tell me about how did that come about? What's the thinking behind coil springs and leaf springs? And is that a big engineering build to have?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. It was one that we've hotly debated internally as well. When we started with the new TNG F platform, it was really meant to be a coil based suspension. And the idea was that we would have flexibility we could modify with thickness and with the Dejima blanking that we've talked about, or the Taylor welded blanking, to adjust for wheelbase length differences as well as strength differences. But everything was going to be on that multi-link design, that coil link design. When we were looking at the compact segment, compact really goes from a very wide range. We have to supply a product that's very value driven to the customer. So the price sensitivity is important, making sure there's good value for their money. And then all the way up to, really, we're starting to see some folks looking at the compact in what would traditionally be, I'll say, luxury amenities that you might only see in like the full size and sometimes even the premium full size. People weren't asking so much for the big truck. They're looking for the right size truck, but they still wanted it to have those amenities. So when we started to think about how do we address this large population or this large spread of customer, the concept was, do we need to provide this? Can we provide a better value proposition for that entry level customer? And so while the Leaf is still an excellent suspension system, it just doesn't have the lateral ride support and comfort that we're getting out of our multi-link. But what we did was we said, if we can keep the silhouette of the frame the same, and then what we were basically able to do is, with a secondary operation through some welding of some brackets and punching a hole in that frame for the hanger brackets, we could then maybe provide this, I'll say, more cost-effective, value-based suspension system. And that was the idea, but we had to keep the vehicle ride height the same, so we weren't massively changing all of the packaging and the componentry. And so really our chassis team took pencil to paper and really scratched their head, thought the best way to do that. And they came up with a really clever way of, rather than going, the previous generation, we were overslung. So basically the springs are over the axle. We went with an underslung, kind of like a little bit more of an older school sort of approach, which was great because it allowed us to use that same frame silhouette. So we didn't have the big investment. We could pull out a lot of the link componentry, which does drive some cost. But really there wasn't a lot of additional investment. So it was really, and then frankly speaking, to develop another leaf spring, that's not really tooling intensive. So we were able to do that with minimal investment, but I think deliver great value. And really, with the new chassis itself and the rigidity and the improvements that we've made to that, actually, it's actually a step up from the previous Leaf to the new Leaf. So it's really just delivering better performance. But like a lot of our customers, they're value driven. Just said, hey, I drive a truck. I've driven a truck my whole life. I know what a truck feels like. I know what a truck drives like. If it's a little bit more agricultural, if you will, it wasn't a problem. So we were really trying to focus on that value proposition.
Which is the better one off road? We know that a lot of Tacoma drivers like to play.
Well, if you look at it holistically, surely our Tier D off-road package is a much better setup. That it goes into everything. We start to think about what are the suspension components, the absorbers that we're putting on there. We're using the Bilstein with the piggyback reservoirs, right? And that's a pretty significant absorber package that we're putting on there. But I mean, the other one is still very capable. We've driven them through the trails. If I was going to buy the off-road truck, I would go with the Tier D off-road. That would be my personal choice. If we were excluding Trail Hunter and Pro from the conversation. But I think both of them have their advantages, and you can still make modifications. You can still lift and raise the trucks if that's what you choose to do, and you can put a little bit more aggressive tire on the Leaf package. Right now, it's more of a street tire that we're putting in there because, again, it's not really a true dedicated off-road. You will see it in our pre-runner where we do offer that suspension setup, and that has an off-road tire on it as well.
So you have a wide bandwidth of offerings. I mean, you mentioned
do.
some.
I was just going to say the same thing.
Yeah.
And so talk to us about that. I mean, it's not just suspension differences.
No, it really isn't. When we set up with our concept, one of the things we talked about is a Tacoma for everybody. And so we have 8 different effective, I'll say, grade configurations, if you will. And it was to look at this broad customer band. You can look at the market, and a lot of folks, I think, if you sort of think about the distribution curve, right? A lot of folks are focused right in that meat of the market. And our initial sort of go-to-market plan was we were going to aggressively compete on the entry level. Then we were going to absolutely defend the core. We call the core like our SR5 and our TR grades. That's our TRD grades. That's where we probably sell the most volume. That's what most people are purchasing. So we knew we had to completely advance that. For us, limited, we always under-index there. It wasn't something that I think we sold a ton of limiteds. And so we really wanted to change our thought process in limited and not make it, a leather wheel and tire package. It was really a whole lot more. And then, of course, we had we call them our Halo grades, but those would be our TRD Pro and now our Trail Hunter. So when we took that approach, what we wanted to do then was to say, okay, if we're going to have this many variations, then we need to really make sure that we are providing differentiation between the different grades and something that the customer can understand. And based on where they place their values, they can decide which of these products is best. So we talked about having a sort of a performance tuning strategy, the use of hardware, and then when I say specification, the goodies, the content that you get in the truck. And so really walking from our SR, which is kind of our entry based, and our extra cab, which is very, very much a value based truck, all the way up to, like I said, our premium packages. And so we've combined, it's really easy in development. You kind of push towards the middle. You don't want anything to be a little too rough or a little too sporty or a little too off-roady, and you kind of get a bunch of trucks that kind of fall in the middle. And we really wanted to avoid that. So we said, nope, if you're going to buy a sport, it's going to be an off-road tune. It's going to be intentional. You're going to buy an off-road package, an on-road tune and intentional. You're going to buy an off-road package, it's going to be off-road and intentional. And kind of that same way across the rest of the grade. So we bring technology like, active variable suspension for our limited grade, where we really want to make that a luxury. We add power running boards, things of that nature that are really saying, okay, we're going to provide you the right size luxury truck. Still going to have the sort of athletic appearance, of the Tacoma. And you'll still have that sort of Tacoma DNA, but it's going to be a different execution. So that was our strategy.
I'm sure what you found too is that on the higher grades, there are people there who will spend a lot of money, and you don't have to have a full-size pickup to get them to spend that kind of money.
Well, for us, it's always, I appreciate, we know the market is there, and we've certainly seen it, and we've seen it with some of the other, I'll say, offerings from our competitors, and the market becomes smaller in that area. But again, we know that, some folks,
the market's smaller, but the margins are better.
Well, yeah, there's certainly an opportunity to provide that sort of that amenity.
Talk about that Trail Hunter, because you've
Sure.
got all these accessories. Isn't it like an Australian accessory company that you're working with?
We do partner in some cases with ARB, which is directly out of Australia. They do have operations here in North America, but primarily they're a foundation.
But I mean, this is the brand
That's
to
right.
go to, right?
That's
For
right. Yeah, so when we were looking at
overlanding and stuff like that.
you,
right?
you nailed it. So when we were looking at the original like TRD Pro, that's sort of in our our OG of performance trucks, and what we found when we started looking at the segment was a lot of folks were buying the TRD, but then they were using it for a lot of different reasons. TRD was about it was Baja inspired desert racing. It's all about adrenaline fueled fun, going fast.
Ivan Stewart.
Ivan Stewart, yeah, right. The icon. That was really the inspiration, truly, for this next generation of truck was that Baja Ivan Stewart truck. And so it's tough to do that really well when you want things to be nimble and light and really built for speed, and then make them great for tactical rock crawling with heavily laden. So we said, and we saw this emerging trend. I think 2015, 2016, 2017 was really starting to build the sort of outdoor adventure lifestyle that we were seeing, overlanding, if you will. And then, of course, I think it was just like pouring fuel on the fire when the pandemic hit, and it was the last place you could go. Where can you go is where no one else is, right? Go to the great outdoors. So we came up with this concept of Trail Hunter and saying, what if we, we saw people building trucks. The first thing you do is put a deck rack on, then you put a tent on top. And honestly, that's probably not the best way to build your truck. You really want to build it from the bottom up, right? You want to make sure you fortify it, you have the suspension, you're raising the center of gravity. Those are more difficult things to do for the average customer. So we thought, if we're going to bring value to this, what we could do then is sort of build it foundationally and then allow those customers to basically accessorize it, customize it, make it their own. And so what we wanted to do was partner with really credible, I'll say aftermarket companies like ARB, where we had common, I'll say, corporate objectives and goals and views on how we want to develop product, bring them together so that we could really deliver a very simple integrated solution. But then when we worked with those groups, we'd understand what are the accommodations that might be needed on the truck. So we wanted to make sure that Tacoma, you could buy the turnkey system, so to speak. We've accessorized it with these partnerships, and we give you the ability to roll those into your financing with our associated accessory products. But if you want to do your own, or if you have a special brand that you like, that's okay. So we made sure to include the accommodations on the vehicle. So we have the weld nuts in the frame and in the rocker, and we have the provisions already in the roof for roof racks and things of that nature. So we wanted to be that platform. Let you decide ultimately how you want to customize it.
So benchmark the competition, the newer competition that's in the market. Did they always benchmark you? Did you guys take a look at what they were doing?
In this industry, you're always looking over your shoulder a little bit to make sure you know what's going on, right? You don't want to be tone deaf to something that's happening. But honestly, I think this segment was in a really interesting place because most of the product in the segment was pretty long in the tooth. And so we were all, what we assumed everybody was going to be doing a refresh at the time. We were all kind of trying to figure out where we wanted to be. And there really wasn't, I wasn't going to go benchmark a vehicle that was launched in effectively 2016 for what I want to do for 24 and beyond, right? So that was actually a challenge for us. And so, but we said, you know what? Can't look backwards. We got to look forward. So we are at the moment we have the privilege and the ability to be the segment leader, and so we need to demonstrate that leadership. And so it was really pushing to where we think the truck needed to be. So we looked to see what was going on in full size and see what was happening there. But really for our segment, it was about setting a pretty strong, what are our priorities, where do we want to be, and how do we really push the bar.
So I want to ask you, John, you and I have been talking recently about this drive that more companies are having to reduce the variation.
Reduce complexity. I was going to ask about that. Right.
So, I mean, Sheldon's
you
talking
guys are
about
going
a lot
the
of stuff.
direction. You're like adding complexity.
Well,
hugely.
So we have, but we tried to do it in a smart way. So
there's a great Mark Royce quote. He says, complexity doesn't matter as long as the customer is willing to pay for it.
Sure. And there's some truth to that, right? And what we actually, believe it or not, we did actually spend one of the core tenets anytime we do a vehicle is we look at our total number of component parts, we look at our variations, we look at our option packages, and then we go through and figure out, okay, how can we basically reduce all those so that we can make room to do some of the things that we wanted to do on this truck. So while on the surface, it certainly looks like we do have more variations in total, the base truck, we've really been able to, when I say I'll say the core foundational componentry of the truck, we've actually been able to reduce the amount of total parts in the vehicle, which allowed us then to extend or to increase, if you will, some of the variations.
How'd you do that? How'd you reduce the number?
Well, it gets to be, there's a number of different ways that we can do it. Some of it is like, for example, one of the simple ways is like, if you look at our powertrain controller, basically where that would have been multiple different switches, multiple different, I'll say, if you will, switches, buttons, knobs, etc. We were able to put a bunch of those into one functional system that does a lot of the same functions, but you're utilizing like the digital screen now to basically give you the different representation of the mode that you're in or something like that. So we use some technology in some areas like that. We use some commonization where, again, while maybe the total number's not the same, when we think about our plant, for example, if we're leveraging parts out of Tundra or Sequoia or on this common F platform, we can do some things like that. And then we can share parts across our global platform. So total part count versus development. There's some games that we're playing there to make sure that we have a lot of I'll say a lot of common use and a lot of integral and interchangeable parts.
Mhm.
And that's one of the great parts about the TNGF platform. The ability to swap and to share. And so if we got something, for example, the rear axle, when we go into our hybrid, right, we have the differential. I'm basically sharing the differential housing from Tundra, right? So I didn't have to really redevelop it. So it's a different part number, but from a development standpoint of view, a different gear pack, but the rest of it's very much common.
One thing I like about this truck is you did a great job on the basic engineering of the truck, but you got a lot of very clever features in there, something that I didn't expect. And I'd like to go through some of them, but
Please.
talk with that about that Bluetooth speaker that sits on top of the instrument panel.
So that was great. We were just talking about CES, so we're just ahead of the show, and it was actually, that was something that came out of CES. We were sitting with our friends from JBL after the show, and we were just chit-chatting, and I had mentioned that we were doing our concept development for the truck, and I at the time there may have been someone else who had a Bluetooth speaker at that moment, or had a speaker that was portable. I know we had looked at it maybe in a previous generation when we were doing some Sienna planning back in the day. But one of the challenges we said is, if we're going to do it, I want it to be functional, and I wanted that to differentiate it, right? So I don't want to just have a big dead mass that's sitting in behind the rear seat that I can pull out when I want to use. I want it to be there every day. And so we started talking with the JBL team, and I think it was kind of fun because at the original discussion, like, yeah, sure, yeah, then we'll get the cost, and then it'll get poo-pooed and it'll never make it to the final show. But we're passionate about that because we really wanted Tacoma to be about active outdoor lifestyle. That's how most of our customers identified themselves. And they sort of see that as the sort of their expression, their self-expression. And we wanted this to be this active outdoor adventure who, as you're going out to the campsite, or you're going out to the place where you're going to launch the boat, you've got your tunes and you want to bring those with you. And so that was really the genesis of that. And then it had to be portable. It had to be functional. It had to make sure that it was waterproof. And if you're loading into the kayak, if you dropped it in the water, you could, snatch it back up and you didn't destroy it. But the key was, make it part of the audio system when it's in the truck. So in our case, it's right there in the dashboard, which or the IP, the dash panel. And heat load was a big issue for us to put it there, but we started looking at a bunch of different places to put it, and it just didn't give you the same function as it did as the center channel there. So we went with the battery technology that allowed us to do that, and to basically it's a lithium solid state, and that really allows it to have the endurance under the high heat loads that maybe a traditional lithium ion wouldn't support.
So there are solid state batteries coming into Toyotas already.
Right.
Yes,
that's exactly right.
How big are they? Like this?
Yeah, they're not that
tiny,
large. That's
huh?
right. Yeah.
But the other thing,
they package inside of a part that's got a speaker. So yeah.
Sheldon, the other thing they said is you can link these Bluetooth speakers. So if you happen to have a campsite or off-roading site, and you've got 5 tacos there, they could all sync their Bluetooth speaker together.
That's exactly right. Up to, I believe, 100 you can link together. So yeah, you can have a real big taco party. But yeah, that was important, right? We wanted to make sure that folks, had the ability to use them and to bring them to campsites. We've done some test drives where, we pull off and we'll bring lunch, and we'll, if we're doing an off-road test, and we'll find a place to park and pop them all out and put them around the site, and everyone gets to have their lunch and listen to some music while we're doing it. But it does that. It like I said, it works as a center channel if you happen to remove it, and let's say, I don't know, you leave it in your backpack or whatever, it's okay. The EQ recognizes that it's not in the vehicle, and it rebalances it to the tweeters, and so you still get excellent performance without it, but of course much better with it.
Okay, so you plug this thing into the top of the IP, and then you unplug it and you carry it around. It's about this big.
Oh, come on, it's about that big.
Oh, well. Okay,
it fits in your pocket. Let me put it that way.
Okay, so my question is,
yeah,
when you're driving on rocks and beating the hell out of the truck, how do you keep that from flying around inside the vehicle? So
we have basically we are physically or rigidly mounted with a nest that we're calling the docking station. That's bolted directly to the IPR, the instrument panel reinforcement. And then we actually have a physical mechanical mechanism in there. There's actually molded in with little metal bars, and that comes and locks right around that, and that withstands a full frontal impact and rollover, and so It was built to be crashed. So
Speaking of all that rough off-road driving, the thing that blew my mind about this is what you guys are calling an isodynamic seat.
yeah.
And you've got shock absorbers built into the seat. And the thing that really impressed me is it doesn't just smooth out the real rough, high-speed off-roading. It greatly diminishes head toss.
That was
so talk about that. And I'm told that this was a top secret project within Toyota.
It was, you know, and we're proud of it. We're proud of the team that put it together. They really did work hard on it. The genesis of the idea actually came back from something that Lexus had shown, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago, and they called it a kinetic seat. And you can go look it up and you'll see it. And it was a little bit of a different configuration. And its idea was to reduce inputs to body to reduce fatigue. And they brought it over to us here, and they were saying that they were showing it off, and it was a great idea. And we talked to the lead engineer at the time, and he was anxious to get it somewhere. We just said, we don't know where it's going to fit. So we were kind of scratching our head on what did we want to do on TRD Pro, you know, to really, again, move that bar and advance it. And then we said, could we reimagine the use of that? So we changed the mechanism a little bit. But to your point, the ultimate goal was really to decouple the occupant from some of the harsher input loads so that we could stabilize the head mass and keep your eyes focused so that you could be very, very focused on control of the vehicle and what you're, you know, being able to focus on what you're doing. And so we started looking, you know, especially at, I'll say professional athletes, and even, you know, I think we showed some pictures to some folks that were out at the tech center of, you know, like a cheetah running in the wild, right? Making a hard cut, and you see the body is this way, but the head is square and focused, right? And because you're focusing on the task at hand. And so that was, how do we change that? So what we ended up doing, to your point, was we have basically a front swivel in the front of the lower seat cushion. We have a swivel with a spring mechanism in the back, and then we allow basically this to rock. And
it's kind of gimbaled.
It is.
The seat is.
Exactly right.
I shouldn't say kind of, it is.
It is, that's right. And it's a little bit interesting because when we were first explaining, people are trying to think of it as a typical shock. And really what it's trying to do is it's resisting your mass. It's not so much, you know, back and forth as much as it is as your body goes this way. It's giving resistance, and it's basically recentering you at all times.
It's damping all the moves.
That's exactly what it does. And so the idea then behind that is, as you're going through here, you know, through the road and the trail, and you're bouncing and you're doing this, instead of having these hard, you know, dynamic inputs where you're trying to, you know, brace your body, you're able to, the seat's able to take some of that impact out. You know, anecdotally, I can tell you just about everybody, you drive the first trail the first time, you go through about 10, 15 mile an hour faster, just because your confidence is so much greater because of the, you know, just the lack of the input that you're feeling. But then we can show you also that just the amount of input going into the human body is significantly reduced. And so we believe, you know, the other piece of that is going to be reduction of fatigue, especially if you're right seating it in an off-road training, or you happen to be in a journalist drive and you're in the right seat all the time. You feel a whole lot better at the end of the day than you do otherwise. So that was something we developed here in North America. We talked about, you know, we really wanted to get it to a point where people could feel it, we could demonstrate it, and so we could really prove its merit.
So why the top secret approach? This was kind of under lock and key, and only a handful of people knew about it, right?
It was one we thought we hadn't seen anything in the market like it, and so we wanted to make sure that we were pretty quiet about it until we were ready to go public with it. And then the other thing was, you know, there was just an element that we mentioned that, you know, I think on paper sometimes we're quick to say no to things, and so even internally, we wanted to keep the development team small. We wanted them to move quickly, and we wanted to not, you know, do it with this big emphasis and scrutiny and a lot of different opinions on it. So we really wanted to get it to what I would say is a really truly functional proof of concept. And so then we took it out and we walked through. We shared with our sales and our marketing teams and some of our executives in manufacturing as well, and really let them say, you know, we'll talk about it on paper. Now go drive it. And I think the proof was in the pudding. And that's what we really wanted to do, to make sure it had its chance to be a thing before it got cut on the chopping block. So
Tacoma has something that a lot of competitors in that segment don't have, and that's a real fiercely loyal fan base, really passionate about the product. Does Toyota have communications with those guys to find out what they want? Did they ask you for something like this?
You know, the isodynamic seat, I don't think so. Everyone basically wanted a V8, and So they wanted the two things I heard the most is please raise the seating position, which we were able to do in this truck, and try to get you up off the ground a little bit. And then, like I said, it was the power. They wanted more power and better fuel economy. Those were the big three things we heard. But in the beginning of any vehicle redesign, when you're starting to do the CE concept, part of that is obviously we have a lot of different places we can find information. We can go to JD Powers, we can go to forums. We do a lot of that. We scan the forums. We're talking to people. We're out at events like at Overland Expo and other areas where we know that Toyota enthusiasts are, and we go to the FJ Cruiser events and the drives in Moab, etc. And you want to hear directly from the customer. Then we also do a lot of clinicking. And we do that because we want to make sure that we get a large swath of different markets, right? And it's amazing, what folks do on the East Coast versus what folks do on the West Coast versus the South. Very different. So we go to a lot of different areas to get those.
Mm-hmm. Hey, we're going to have to take a quick commercial break for the moment. Give a shout out to our great friends at Bridgestone and Intrepid Control Systems.
How do Bridgestone tires stop shorter on wet roads? It's their HydroTrack technology. But you don't have to know how the science works, just where the brake is. What really matters is their Bridgestone.
We want to know what drives your testing. OTA, connected car, diagnostics, remote testing. Intrepid Control Systems is here to help you work from anywhere. Intrepid Control Systems, driven by your data.
All right, we're back talking all things Tacoma with Sheldon Brown from Toyota.
So Sheldon, I think we're sort of taking for granted here that everybody knows the extent to which this vehicle is designed and engineered in the United States. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate it. It was a great opportunity. Toyota is a global company, no matter any which way you look at it, right? And we have great collaboration with Japan and with our colleagues in Japan. But this was really, Tacoma is first and foremost a North American market product. And we had a really big, I'll say, vote of confidence from our colleagues in Japan to say we want the leadership and the North American design team to really be where the truck is going to sell the most, where we're going to spend most of our time with it. So we did a lot of the development on the platform, but we sent a lot of our engineering teams over there so that as we were doing platform development, for the chassis and the foundational component parts, we were involved. That we were able, even when we were doing the original platform development, so even before Tacoma was a approved, vehicle development start, we were able to put in these are the things that we're going to need, right? This is what the customer market is going to want. And so while they were planning Land Cruiser, for example, we're able to talk about what we need for full size, what do we need for compact. Mike Swears was over there for about a year and a half, and he was really sort of helping lead that. And then we were in North America supporting Mike to make sure that we had those inputs, we had those driving scenes, we had those customer use scenes, those we have things like high lift jack points in the back of the frame, right? And a lot of people are like, what? Why are you doing that, right? And we wanted to show why we can add value. But then as soon as, we kind of got to that point, we brought all of that back, and basically from, all the styling was done here at our Kelty studio. All the preliminary engineering, packaging, vehicle studies were all done here. And then we got to the point where we get our authorization, our milestone that we show. We have to show the business side of things. We have to show the product. We have to show the market. We have to show the strategy. We have to show the development targets. Basically, it's the culmination of the CE image, of the CE concept. Once we got that green lighted, that was all done right here in North America. So really, in earnest, we got started here in 2019, working on the truck, and then really hit the go button just before that whole global pandemic thing came through in early 2020. And it's been just complete development. All the tuning, all of our powertrain calibration was done here using big data, making sure that, all those lessons learned we had from the market, making sure that we were integrating that into all the powertrain configurations, as well as in all the tuning that we did. So all that happened right here. And of course, manufacturing here within the North American footprint, and all of our production engineering resources and our manufacturing folks were right here. We built all of our prototypes in our Ann Arbor facility, did all that early, I call them prototypes, they're really first off production tool vehicles. And we did all that evaluation, and all that calibration was all done right here. So a lot of energy, a lot of hours. It was probably, this and Tundra were the two single largest projects that we've done. So,
was there ever any consideration to do a unibody truck? We see more and more body on frames migrating to unibodies, and was there any investigations into that?
I'm a truck on frame guy, a body on frame guy. I don't know what unibody means. Could you explain that? We surely have looked at the concept of unibody, but the TNG-F platform by definition is sort of body on frame, and we felt in terms of durability, ruggedness, and what our truck sort of DNA was, the body on frame was the way to go. And we were going to stay that way. That's not to say that there isn't an opportunity out there in the future, and with maybe different configurations where unibody would make sense, but not for Tacoma, not for this product, not right now.
Sheldon, I'd like to get your views on the midsize truck segment.
Sure.
Because Toyota religiously was always there, and I think that's one reason why the Tacoma still is so successful. It never went away.
Yep.
And your success led other automakers to say, hey, wait a minute, maybe there's something more to this midsize truck segment. So we've seen Ford and Chevrolet and GMC and Honda and others come into the segment.
Yeah.
How big is the segment going to be, do you think?
That's a great question. It's one that candidly, I'm always impressed to see the amount of growth that we've seen, right? When we saw the reemergence of some of, as you mentioned, the competitors coming back in the late teens there, and then like 17, 18, 19, there was some real questions like, how big do we think it can get? What I can tell you is empirically, every time we have seen a new entry, it hasn't been fighting for the same market. The market just keeps expanding and expanding. And right now I think I would tell you, we're probably predicting, I'll say mild growth. It's probably not going to, skyrocket to get bigger and bigger, but we're starting to see some of the unibodies coming in probably more compact than midsize, to be perfectly candid.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about, what do you think? Maverick, Ford Maverick, Hyundai Santa Cruz, are they just nibbling at the edges, or how do you view them?
I think you have to be careful about where that market is and what that customer is, because that's not to say, and you need to look at it, where does it fit into your total portfolio? I think there's different reasons different automakers bring those vehicles in. And so, when we start thinking about emissions and GHG footprints and things of that nature, I think there's going to be different strategies for different automakers. Clearly, there's been a good market response to that. How big that market will be and how much it'll grow, I think there's probably room for growth there. I just, I don't think, at least where we see our core market, I don't think people are cross-shopping those two particular vehicles, because a lot of our customers, they want that, they want the ground clearance, they want the ability to tow, they want that ability to carry cargo. And honestly, even if it's not like big, heavy cargo, it's your motorcycles and your snowmobiles and the toys, right? We always say, Tundra's for towing and hauling, and Tacoma, all your toys, and Tacoma is the toy kind of, right? And you bring your smaller toys with you. So I think there's a definite unique DNA for each of those. So I don't, my personal opinion, we're watching closely, but I don't think we're going to see a lot of cross shop in that area.
And for the midsize, not the Mavericks and the Santa Cruzes, where are those buyers coming from? If the midsize is growing, it doesn't seem to be coming out of full size pickups, or am I wrong? Where are those customers coming from?
We're seeing a little bit of the full size. I think especially, as we see, maybe like fuel prices go up, sometimes you see some sensitivity there. And I think you'll see some folks, kind of move down into something a little bit more efficient, a little bit, smaller, a little bit easier to manage and drive around. Certainly we're seeing a lot coming out of the, I'll say, small SUV and pass car market, right? We're surprising, honestly, that we're seeing the pass car continue to, I don't want to say continue to shrink. I think it's sort of gotten to a pretty stable size, right? But we've certainly got a lot of conquest from those areas. And we're seeing people also just within the Toyota lineup. It's sort of a, as you start to get into your entry level Toyota, then you start to graduate up to the, a little bit more income, a little bit more, you're looking for more functionality in your vehicle. Maybe you have a family, or maybe you're, again, you've got some discretionary income to have a second vehicle that you want to use for more utilitarian purpose. We're seeing people come in that market as well. So we're excited. The main thing we have is incredible customer loyalty. And, that part of that is in our residual values. Part of that is in the promise that we make for the quality that we're going to deliver. And, we didn't take that lightly on the development of this truck.
So Sheldon, we've gone more than half the show, and we haven't brought up the fact that you guys are offering a hybrid. Talk us about the powertrain strategy.
Thanks for bringing that up. Lots to talk about, and sometimes easy to forget about the most important things. So, I think Toyota has said, I think since 2018, we have a goal by I think 2024, 2025 that we will have a electric or electrified powertrain option in across our entire lineup. And so it was natural that we were going to continue to do that with trucks. When we started thinking about, I'll say this entire F platform, the question became, how do we want to do that, and where do we want to place our emphasis? And in the truck, we did a little bit different than we've done in some of our traditional hybrids, where they are hyper focused on fuel economy and efficiency. In the truck market, really where we said we thought we could bring some additional value is in the idea of a sort of, I'll say, performance or power-based hybrid. But we still wanted to make sure that we are getting improved efficiency as well. So for those folks, who've always said we were teasing before about the V8, but we're basically bringing V8 power into a four-cylinder motor with a hybrid motor assist. And really the incredible thing is, to me, is the no compromise in this. It's you get better fuel efficiency, you get better torque, you get better horsepower, and you get we're talking about like SULEV 30 emission standards, right? So it's a far more efficient and a much better I'll say emissions performing vehicle. So there is no compromise.
And full-time all-wheel drive, even with the hybrid.
We do give you that specifically in our limited grade, and that was another value that we wanted to bring. We can use a little bit of that efficiency to bring some things that otherwise might reduce efficiency in a traditional vehicle. But yeah, and I think that's something that's important. Again, in that luxury truck where people want it to be kind of an SUV, but it really came down to we looked at the body on frame SUV versus the body on frame truck. It's really, do you want covered storage or do you want passengers or do you want cargo hauling? And so that was sort of the big distinguisher. And so if we look at like the traditional or I'd say the previous generation 4Runner Tacoma, really a lot of common customer traits, and then it really comes down to how do you want your cabin configured.
So let's talk nuts and bolts on that hybrid powertrain for a second.
Sure.
Where is the electric motor packaged, and does it drive on electric power only up to a certain speed, or tell us how it works? Yeah, no problem. So it's really we call it the one motor, and it's really hybrid assist. Basically what we do is between the motor and the transmission housing, we basically we sandwich in this one motor. It's really a one motor generator because it also is good for regen as well. It is actually the same concept, in fact the same motor that we use for Tundra Sequoia. Of course, the difference being that they're paired to a 10-speed versus our 8-speed. So there's been some modifications in that. Identical battery that's housed it's below the rear seat. So what we're able to do then is, if you think about the torque curve, where we're waiting for those turbos to spool up, and we're not waiting too long, but we're able to basically fill in that torque curve in the front side, and then of course the peak becomes higher, and then as we trail off, we can also pick it up on and when the torque curve starts to trail off on the downside. So we don't spend a lot of time focusing on pure electric drive, but there is a small motion, but there isn't a quote unquote all EV mode, if you will. So it's not just the motor, because the motor in and of itself really isn't that large, but it's really there for that torquey application. Great for response, great for you really feel it when you're 30 miles an hour and you want to goose it and get on the expressway, for example. It gives you all that power, and it's instantaneous. And so it is an excellent complement to the turbos. Again, our turbos, we really did fashion more response than total peak power, and the motor is just a really good, I'll say, assist to those and making sure that we build that power really quick.
So it's completely different than the type of hybrid that's, say, used in a Prius.
Yeah, our Toyota hybrid system, or THS, totally different. That's a 2-motor generator system, and very, very different application. Yeah.
You don't get to escape the clutches of journalists without talking about future products.
Sure.
So absolutely. We know that Tacomas tend to live a long time. Have you protected it for maybe an electric powertrain someday, or does that require a different frame? Talk to us about that.
Yeah, I'd tell you that I think Akio showed a truck that, I don't know, looked like it's coming to me. But obviously I can't get into too much of the details there, but that is critically important. Where do we see the electrification? right now, the one motor or the hybrid variation, I think, is where we're very comfortable with that technology, and I think the value that it brings to the customer and to the segment. The real next question becomes is how do we see proliferation of electrification? And I think the real debate is going to come between, do we want to go battery electric in the body and frame and pick up in the off-road vehicles, or do we want to go plug-in? And right now, I'll say from a general trending, I don't think the PHEVs have been getting the attention, or frankly speaking, really the credit, if you will, that they deserve, because it's a really interesting solution to me in the truck market. Where most of us, people like me, when I drive, I think my round trip is, I'm 17 miles each way. I mean, I can very easily on a plug-in hybrid, powertrain system, drive pure electric in my truck every day. When I'm just pushing air and it's just me and I'm not doing anything other than getting to the office. So for me, and I think for a lot of customers, in fact, the vast majority of most customers, we actually look at how far they travel to and from in a given day. There could be incredible benefit, I think, from a plug-in type application.
What's your thoughts on what the range should be? Because my PHEV friends, they don't want to hear anything under 50 miles. They in fact, they would love to see something in the 60 to 100 mile range. But what do you think the Tacoma buyer would want in terms of range?
Well, that's a tough question, because anytime you ask someone how much do you want,
they always want
as
more.
much as possible, right? Exactly. I couldn't give them 600 horsepower. You'd want 7.
Yeah, of course.
But when you look at the macro numbers, honestly, 50 is pushing that limit. When you start to get about 35 to 50 is that sweet range. You're looking at, what does it take if you put 12,000 miles a year or 15,000 miles a year on a vehicle? You're not commuting that far every single day. And the idea, of course, is to really strike that healthy balance, because you are putting in, a battery and a motor that you have to size for that. And you still have, of course, you have to assume that you're going to be in a situation where you don't have the battery assist at some point in time, right? So in that case, you want to make sure that there's enough capability in the inherent ICE powertrain to drive pleasantly, the vehicle. So I think that's where the balance needs to be struck between those priorities. So, I know we're seeing a lot of the regulation trying to say above 50. It's probably on the high side, if I'm being perfectly honest. But surely we want to make sure that we're looking at the market. So I think we're spending a lot of time, really taking a look at what is that customer need and what does that customer want. We got into, well, I'll say as an industry, we had to be a little bit careful. Sometimes we have to listen to what the customer wants and not always try to tell the customer what they want. That doesn't always work that well. You could be the smartest engineer in the room, and if the customer doesn't want it, they don't want it. Yeah, you're the loneliest engineer in the room. So I think that's going to be an important balance. And so where I really hope that this goes is more market driven rather than regulation driven. We certainly want to reduce emissions. We certainly want to cooperate with this sort of concept of overall greenhouse gas reduction. It's critical. It is the most important thing from our industry to make sure that we sustainability so that we can be around. So we take it very seriously, but we want to make sure that we're also thinking about what are the offsides of, we have a limited number of resources and we have a limited number of supply of batteries. So using those batteries really, really efficiently is the play that we're going after.
Yeah, it's as you know, pickup buyers are some of the most conservative in the marketplace.
Sure.
They like their pickups. They keep coming back and buying the same one. They're so brand loyal. Sure. Do you think PHEV would satisfy them? Is that something? And here's why I'm asking.
Yeah.
When I look at the Ford Lightning, I think it's a terrific truck. I love the way it drives.
Sure.
But the people who are buying it are not pickup buyers.
Sure.
In fact, I think Ford has said 70% of those buyers have never owned a pickup before. So I don't think it's pickup buyers saying, hey, there's the pickup for me. It's other people who are interested in electrics and going, hey, this is a pretty terrific truck that fits my needs. Yeah. So I'm just trying to get my head around where you think pickup buyers will go. And is a PHEV something that they'll go, yeah, that's the ticket. I really want it.
It's a good question. It's a tough question, to be honest with you, because I think there needs to be, I think PHEV is still a little bit of an esoteric concept to, I'll say, the broad consumer base. I think people get, okay, it's battery. I understand it's ICE, right? It's gasoline. And then what's the hybrid, and what's the difference between a hybrid and what's a range extender versus a plug-in hybrid, right? So I think that the technology in itself can be a little bit confusing, and I think that we need to do a little bit better job of really explaining that product. To me, when the demands that I hear from our pickup truck customers are, I bought the truck to tow and to haul when I need it, and so it may truly be, the niche actual part of the actual job duty cycle, but that's why you bought it,
You're
right?
buying the dream, and that's their dream. They
That's
want to
right.
do that stuff.
And so what I think is a really, interesting part about the plug-in hybrid, as people start to understand it better, is you really have that quote unquote emergency or safety blanket, if you will, right? You can run most of the time, if we're talking about that 35 to 50 mile range, you're running most of the time in electric mode. When you're running out, going grocery getting, taking the kids to soccer game or running to and from work, etc., you're basically in electric mode. And then when you decide to go up north and bring the motorcycles, or you're taking the kids camping for the weekend, you have the ability to fall back on the range that you get with the gasoline backup. And so I think from that standpoint of view, it really does provide a great solution in what I would say is the body and frame of the pickup. There's some commercials that you'll see where vehicles are going up a mountain, and there's charging stations at the top of the mountain, and I haven't seen that in my own everyday outdoor experiences. Not to say that it doesn't exist. I'm sure it could in a certain utopia, but people want to have that freedom, and I think what this really does is it sort of it releases them from that fear of range anxiety of saying, man, I want to go up north, but the weather's a little bit. I don't know where my destination, if Uncle Tom is going to have the power I need to charge to get back home. So, we're going to take the gas truck or the gas vehicle this time, right? And so the plug-in really, I think, provides the freedom from that sort of leash, and I think it's a great transition vehicle and really provides the solution that most people are really asking for. But again, time will tell, and we're going to do our due diligence in the market and make sure. We always like to leave the choice to the customer, and that's what we've really been focusing on in terms of our electrification portfolio.
So for the Tacoma, I mean,
mm-hmm.
your regular engine is called the iForce.
Mm-hmm.
The hybrid version is called the iForce Max.
Yeah.
So it strikes me that, and maybe this is more marketing than engineering, but I mean, it almost strikes me that basically you guys are saying, it's just a powertrain option. Don't worry about what's going on under that hood. We're taking care of it for you.
Yeah, I think a little bit to that. I think, especially in the truck market, we wanted the Max is really to focus on max efficiency, max performance, and max power. And that's really what we're trying to deliver the message there. We have such a strong message in what hybrid means, and I think when people say hybrid, probably half the world says Prius, is the word that comes up next.
More than half.
Yeah, right. And that's because I think, we've demonstrated a really strong commitment to it. And we believe that it's an excellent solution, to get us to that transitionary period and to really, I'll say, streamline electrification and really use the benefits of it and to use our battery resources efficiently. There's a lot we can do by, getting rid of less efficient older vehicles and stop our fleet from aging as much and still have a really good impact into the environmental landscape. But to your point, the iForce Max is really to demonstrate it. We like to think of it as max power, max efficiency, and really we've really tried to maximize emissions performance.
Let me ask a question for the Tacoma diehard faithful out there.
Mm-hmm.
You have a manual transmission in this truck.
We do.
Can you say for the record it's there to stay?
It's there to stay for now. Boy, this was another one. Probably some people are questioning, and I'll be honest, that was a project of passion of mine. 50% more pedals. Who doesn't want a good deal, right? It was something for our enthusiasts. We wanted to make sure that we kept it alive. The sales aren't fantastic. I think we're running about 6% now. We're hoping that we can maybe kick that up a notch because there's not a lot of offerings out there. And for the folks, the diehards who really do like it, to me, and I think to a lot of our enthusiasts, especially when you're off road, it just brings that third dimension to that experience, right? That you're working the brake, you got the accelerator, you got the steering, but you've also got this third pedal that comes in, and you're just connected. And if you love that part of it, it's irreplaceable, right? And so we had a way to make it work. It was one of those, one of those things that we didn't want to see it go away. I didn't want to see it go away, to be very candid. And so we wanted to bring that back. And the problem with that is they're difficult to certify, and they're going to become increasingly difficult
because when you shift, it belches out emissions.
Yeah,
right?
well, we can't control your right foot or your left foot in this case, right? So computers are pretty savvy these days. And so, yeah,
but that's the issue when it comes to certification for emissions. Right?
It becomes very difficult. That's right. Yep. And then, we have to demonstrate what the appropriate shift pattern is, or we have to use a standard, it's not the most, it's a challenging shift pattern. So we wanted to make sure that we were able to bring that out. And so, for the next few years, I think we're in good shape, but the regulatory landscape is changing quickly. The requirements, potentially could change very, very quickly here in 27, 28. We're going to have to reassess, and they're a dying breed, I'm afraid. So
they are, but it's I'm glad you raised the issue here, Richard, because what's interesting to me is it's younger people too who want it. You've all seen those Facebook posts of a H pattern of a shift, and it says, millennial anti-theft device,
Sure.
But it's in fact, there's a lot of young people that absolutely want to have a manual transmission. It's not just old enthusiast boomers like me. It's a whole new generation coming in.
I agree with you. And I'm really encouraged and excited to see that, what's old sometimes is new, and what's new becomes old. And so I think we're seeing a little bit of a resurgence, and I hope that'll be reflected in our sales. But it's just fun. It's still, there's something visceral and just, the experience of driving, and when you really want to be engaged with it, there is nothing that brings you more in tune with what you're doing than, working the gearbox and working the clutch pedal and trying to rev match and really just, heel toe if you really get into it. There's a thrill and excitement of driving, and the manual is the ultimate expression of that in my mind.
Totally. So where's it available in the Tacoma lineup?
So we took a two-prong approach. We brought it all the way down in our SR grade, and we said, okay, for folks, again, total value driven, right? We're gonna offer it there, and then we're gonna kind of skip all the way till we get up into our performance here. So you pick it up again in the TRD Sport and the TRD Off Road. We had to limit the amount of development. We don't offer it with a hybrid. We would have to completely redevelop that transmission to handle that kind of torque and obviously to work with the one motor. So we've left it there. So think of it as performance enthusiast and ultimate value.
But I got to believe too, for those who want it,
Mm-hmm.
that gives Tacoma so much street cred.
I hope so. That's what that was part of our, our thinking about that. But again, we had, for the folks that really want it, right? The folks that said, I've never driven an automatic, or I'll drive a manual to the day I die, or I'll drive that truck until the wheels fall off, because, if it's not available, then they won't have another choice. So we wanted to make sure that we provided, again, Tacoma, we got a Tacoma for everybody. And we'll see. I know there's a lot of folks who really love it, but then when it comes down, push comes to shove, they'll say, well, but I opted for the auto.
Now,
buy the manual. We need the sales.
Now, I know you just said with the hybrid, that'd be a whole nother thing.
Mm-hmm.
But would the hybrid with the electric motor help you with these shift transitions from an emission standpoint?
Well, the problem is when we start to think about these systems, there is a lot of time and energy going into electrified powertrains. And right now, the one sort of odd man out is electrified powertrain with a manual transmission. Just from a volume standpoint of view and the amount of resources, it becomes. I'll just be honest. It becomes difficult for us to justify. If I could show that 85% of the population or 85% of our customers wanted it, no problem. We can bring it. When we start getting into that 11, 9 single digit percentage, it's a tough sell.
Yeah,
tough sell.
That's right.
Yeah.
So the Tacoma's on sale right now, is it?
It is. Yeah. In fact, we're in Farmington Hills, as I believe. Is this right?
Right.
I believe this is one of our first retailed Tacomas is right here in Farmington Hills.
No
so yeah, we're really excited.
All right.
The hybrid's not out yet, though, is it?
The hybrid is not. No.
When does that come?
That should be around April timeframe.
Okay.
April, May. We have a lot of variations on this truck. And we talked about quality being important, right? So when we took a look at our launch approach, we said, okay, we're going to do this in a way that makes a lot of sense. And at least it makes a lot of sense to us. We have 2 plants that we have to launch. We have, a double cab, an extra cab. We have a long deck, a short deck.
Holy moly.
So we've got a lot of variations.
So explain it, because we see a lot of automakers launching with fully loaded vehicles because the best margins, blah, blah, blah. But that's also the highest complexity, the most difficult launch. How are you guys doing it?
Yeah, a little bit different. What we chose to do is we said, okay, we're going to take our volume runners, which is our double cab, and then usually double cab short deck. We are then putting it with our iForce powertrain, which is kind of our high runner in terms of volume. Get that launched, get that out the door, bring our second plant online. And this is not just for our supply base, but it's also for our manufacturing group. You want repetition. You want to build that truck. You want our team members to make sure that they're doing it right every single time. Right? And you don't want to stress our supply base either, right? So you want them to get comfortable. Okay, now we're going to bring in our extra cab. And we're going to launch that. And then, okay, we'll bring in our additional powertrain in terms of the hybrid, which technically is, I'll say our highest spec vehicles. But you want to bring that in, and we're doing that very intentionally. We're taking a little bit of time. I know our customers are really excited to get these trucks, but we want to do it right, and we want to make sure that every single truck is built perfect every single time. There's a lot of complexity. You guys, you're no strangers to this industry, and it's everybody's got to get it right. And not only our suppliers, but our suppliers, our tier 2s, our tier 3s. And so we want to build that, and we want to gradually build that up and make sure that we can deliver good quality trucks. So
where are they coming from? Where are you going to be building the trucks?
Manufacturing? Yeah. So we have 2 locations. We have our Guanajuato facility, which is in central Mexico. We started building Tacomas there, I believe, in 2019-ish. And then obviously those transitioned when we brought Tundra, the new generation Tundra and Sequoia online in Texas. Basically all the Tacoma production moved down to this new facility in Guanajuato. It's a beautiful facility, state of the art. Just an absolute, if you guys ever get a chance to go down and visit, I would highly recommend it. It is an absolutely gorgeous plant. And then we also are building in our Baja California plant, which is just outside of Tecate, Mexico. And that's where we've been building them, in tandem for at least since 20. We used to build decks out of there. Then we brought production over there. So it's been at least a decade we've been building out of that plant as well. So fortunately, there's quite a bit of demand for the vehicle, and now we have the 2 manufacturing facilities. And so hopefully we can ramp up and meet that demand.
And that's a North American product only?
It's not North American only. It's predominantly North American. Obviously, the 3 biggest markets that we have, of course, the United States, Canada, Mexico, probably in that order. We do export to a few other locations, but our total global exports probably roughly 30,000 units, something like that. And the vast majority, when I say export, the vast majority of that would be Mexico and Canada, if we're talking about just from a U.S. standpoint of view. So, we have other products, obviously, in the IMV platform, predominantly Hilux, et cetera, that go to a lot of our other, that's sort of our quote-unquote global truck.
Look, we've burned up an hour here, but it's been a great hour.
All right.
So Sheldon Brown, Chief Engineer on Tacoma, thanks so much for coming on Autoline After Hours. It's been terrific.
What a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
That's great. Richard, thanks for joining us too.
It was a lot of fun. Always good to be here.
It was great. And I want to thank all of you for having tuned in.
Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, solutions for your journey, and by Intrepid Control Systems, over-the-air engineering. Boost your game.